comité permanent de l'industrie de la technologie.
Welcome to meeting number 6 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Industry and Technology, pursuant to Standing Order 1082 and the motion adopted by the committee on Wednesday, January 26th. The committee is meeting to consider a draft report on the proposed acquisition of Shaw by Rogers.
Sous forme hybride, conformément à l'ordre adopté par la...
Today's meeting is taking place in a hybrid format pursuant to the House Order of November 25th, 2021. Members are attending in person and remotely using the Zoom application.
Oui, alors, je veux d'abord remercier tous les témoins qui se joignent à nous. Merci de prendre...
I'd like to thank all the witnesses for giving us their time today. We have with us today a number of witnesses, and I want to make sure that they're all on board.
Dalhousie University, Monsieur Benoit.
We have Mr. Jeff Don, who's professor at Dalhousie University, Mr. Benoit Lassalle from Aya Gold and Silver, Ms. Meredith B. Lilly, who is a professor at the Norman Paterson School of International Affairs at Carleton. We also have Pierre Graton, who is CEO of the Canadian Mining Association, as well as Brendan Marshall, who is VP Economic and Northern Affairs. And for Propulsion Quebec, Sarah Oud. Thank you all for being with us today. Each witness has 5 minutes for their presentation. And simply a point of housekeeping, when you see my yellow card, that means you have 1 minute. And when you see my red card, that means your time has ended. This applies both to opening speeches and to the questioning rounds. Without further ado, we're going to open the meeting with Mr. Don, who is professor at Dalhousie. You have the floor.
Exist at Dalhousie, Waterloo, Western, NRC, the Canadian Light Source, Hydro-Quebec, and others. Just as in other sectors, Canada lacks manufacturing. Making a lithium-ion battery is not like making toast. For toast, one puts the bread in the toaster, pushes the button, and 90 seconds later, toast pops out. Lithium-ion batteries are made by a series of precision machines, electrode coaters, electrode slitters, cell winding or electrode stacking machines, electrolyte filling machines, cell formation machines, etc. The specification and use of these machines requires extensive know-how and expertise. 2 companies in Canada that have the required know-how and that make lithium-ion batteries: Electrovaya in Mississauga and E1 Mali Energy Canada in British Columbia. These relatively small companies have a track record for making excellent lithium-ion batteries, which does not exist elsewhere in Canada. Electrovaya supplies forklift batteries to manufacturers like Toyota and others. E1 Mali supplies Dyson for its portable vacuum products, as well as other companies. Both of these companies have applied to the Strategic Investment Fund to expand their manufacturing operations in Canada. Electrovaya's applications have been rejected. New York State is now wooing Electrovaya for its expansion. E1 Mali's application appears as it may be successful, but the application process started in 2019. It takes far too long. These companies should be encouraged, not discouraged. and in fact, even pushed by the federal government to expand in Canada. Moving to lithium-ion battery materials and a North American supply chain. Novonix has established a synthetic graphite manufacturing plant in Chattanooga, Tennessee, which is targeted to expand to 40,000 tons of graphite per year by 2025. There's access to inexpensive nuclear and hydropower from the Tennessee Valley Authority. In principle, Novonix could establish operations in Quebec, where there is also access to green hydropower. However, incentives from the Tennessee government were very attractive. Governments must realize its competition to woo companies to a particular place. Canada has lithium, nickel, cobalt, iron, phosphorus, manganese, copper, aluminum, and natural graphite, all of which are used in lithium-ion batteries. However, getting lithium and graphite from the ground to a form suitable for battery material production is not a trivial endeavor. Similarly, synthesizing cathode active materials at large scale and at low cost from the metals or metal compounds requires expertise which does not widely exist in Canada. Government support will be required to attract partners with know-how, capital, and experience to develop these resources through to value-added battery materials in Canada. The selection of these partners and the structure of the deals made to attract them will require great care. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Dunn. I will now turn to Mr. Benoit Lassalle. La parole est à vous pour 5 minutes, Monsieur Lassalle.
Mr. Benoit, Lassalle, you have 5 minutes, sir. Your microphone is not on, sir. Very good. Can you hear me now? Yes, we can. Thank you. Thank you. I'm Benoit Lassalle. Thank you for having invited me to speak to you here today. I am the President and Chief Executive Officer of a number of companies. I have founded a number of them, that is, in the mining sector around the world, covering all metals required for battery production: nickel, copper, cobalt, graphite. The only mineral missing in our bag is lithium. On a day-to-day basis, we are watching closely the race to appropriate minerals needed to produce batteries. The professor has just told us a bit about how batteries are produced, and Canada is indeed a leader in this regard. But for reasons which I find difficult to understand, we haven't ensured that the input, the basic materials, are protected. Lately, we saw something in this regard regarding lithium. Canada has some lithium interests in Australia, also in Ontario. A project which was to be purchased by BHP is now being sold to Australians, and we see this on a daily basis. We have one of the largest deposits of graphite in the world in Guinea, and on a daily basis, foreigners come to us asking to acquire this. As the professor was saying, we need to support companies. We are solicited by Holland, France, Belgium, Norway, all wishing to set up processing plants in their countries using our raw material, the natural graphite. Same thing for nickel. We have a great deal of rare nickel here in Canada. We had a very good project, Voisibé, a deposit discovered in the 1980s that was sold a number of years ago to the Brazilians. So watching this unfold, keeping in mind the metals required to carry through on any transportation strategy we may envisage, but now there's more to it than that. Communication, 5Gs, computers, all these metals, yes, they're used for battery production and for the electrification of our transportation system, but also for aerial transport, for communications, for defense purposes, etc. So as I say, we have a large deposit, a nickel in the Ivory Coast, nickel, cobalt, and other minerals. And there's a team from China looking at it. They've seen the results and they've called us. We're very interested in what you found. We will fund you. We'll support you. We're here to back you, and so on. Mostly we work with Canadian companies based in Montreal, but we do operate around the world. And the truth of the matter is that this worldwide race is palpable. People are running after the rare metals. We're going to lose control of lithium. Do you know how much the cost is of lithium? Do you know how much the cost has risen over the last 14 months? 743%, the lithium carbonate. What Quebec sold to the Australians for 80 million is now worth 1.2 billion. Lithium hydroxide up by 504%, cobalt 100%. Nickel sulfate, 59%. And the next commodity is going to be graphite to explode. We've got some in Canada, in Ontario, and Quebec. We have an enormous deposit in New Guinea. And as I say, people are on the phone daily with us, trying to create associations with us, to buy us out, and so on. Very nice to have the technology. Very nice to say we know how to make batteries. But if you haven't any raw materials to do that with, you can't make it with air and water, And, a pile of sand. You need nickel. For cathodes, for the anodes, you need graphite, natural graphite. So the raw materials, this is what people are going to be fighting over. It's going to be a war, and the Chinese are setting up to win this war. So are the Australians and others, and we're just handing over our natural resources. That's what we've done, and it's what we're doing now. This is unacceptable. I've got the resources, so I'm ready to work with anyone able to work with me. But what we've done so far in the past is absolutely reprehensible. I've said it to the press. Nevertheless, transactions have occurred, and we have been selling off our projects. Thank you so much, Mr. Lassalle.
Turn to Professor Lilly for 5 minutes. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for the opportunity to be here today to speak with members of the committee. I have reviewed previous testimony to the committee, and so I know that members are well versed on the importance of critical minerals to the 21st century and empowering the transition to a green economy. The committee's previous meetings were focused on the sale of neolithium to a Chinese state-owned enterprise without full national security review. And I know members have already heard a great deal about that process. Under the enhanced scrutiny guidelines for critical mineral transactions, the government deemed that no potential harm to national security could occur to warrant a full national security review. This was despite the fact that this was a billion-dollar sale of a Canadian company in the critical minerals sector to a Chinese state-owned enterprise. It's my view that those three simple factors, the value of the sale, the sensitivity of the sector, and the involvement of a state-owned enterprise, should automatically have triggered a full national security review. So given that this didn't occur, and to address the committee's broadened mandate, I'd like to focus my time on how Canada can better use the national security review process to safeguard Canada's interests in the critical minerals sector in the future. First, much of the evidence presented to the committee suggests that Canadian officials are focused on building Canada's own critical mineral capacity, particularly Canadian-based mines and processing. I believe this is essential and have conducted research into how Canada can best position itself geopolitically. However, as Canada seeks to build a domestic supply chain, we also are deeply invested in the broader global context. We are, after all, a trading nation. We must make it our business to understand the global supply chain, which countries control it, and what their relationships are to Canada and our allies. We must also be concerned about the sale of Canadian mining firms, even when the mines are located outside of Canada. My own research has examined the relationship between the viability of Canadian-based extraction in critical minerals relative to foreign-based mining. More than half the world's supply of cobalt is sourced in Congo, often extracted with enslaved child labor in mines owned or controlled by Chinese firms. Canada has significant cobalt reserves of its own, as you've just heard, but extraction here is often deemed not cost-effective, in part due to our comparatively steep labor costs, environmental standards, and regulatory processes. But as the United States and Europe become more concerned with the national security implications of reliance on China, and as they reckon with the poor labor and environmental values reflected in the current foreign supply chains, Canada actually can become a strong competitor precisely for our high standards. The second point I'd like to make is that while Canada should pursue its own critical mineral capacity, it's not in the interest of the international community for global supply chains to be dominated by any single country, and particularly not China. Between 2010 and 2012, China used its monopoly on key critical minerals to reduce global supply and prices. Fortunately, the United States, Canada, and others were successful in our WTO challenge then, but I would advise against relying on a similar strategy for the future. The current global supply chain crisis has taught us that both greater self-reliance and diversification are key for supply chain resilience. Countries such as those in Europe that are not blessed with Canada's natural bounty of critical minerals are just as reliant on them for the green transition. Current events at the border of Russia and Ukraine demonstrate why Europe has a national security interest in resilient supply chains that can't be weaponized by one or two authoritarian countries. So I'll wrap up by saying that Canada can play an important role in a global strategy for critical minerals, both through the establishment of Canadian-based mines and through a more strategic application of our national security review process, in which we formally consult allies on major transactions in the sector, even if those mines are not based in Canada or extracting minerals deemed to be of immediate interest to Canadian companies. But to be such a global leader, Canada's national security process should reflect a more nuanced and strategic approach that can adapt to changing geopolitical circumstances around the world, rather than a narrow focus on individual transactions and immediate Canadian interests. I'd be pleased to answer any questions from the committee.
Thank you very much, Professor. I will now turn to Mr. Walker for 5 minutes.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak today, Mr. Chair. My name is Trevor Walker. I am the CEO of Frontier Lithium, a Sudbury, Ontario-based Canadian-owned pre-production mine development targeting to become a manufacturer of battery-quality lithium to support vehicle and battery supply chains in North America. We are developing the PAC Lithium project located in the OG Cree Treaty 5 region of northwestern Ontario. The asset or resource was discovered originally by the government of Ontario through the OGS in the late 1990s. And I have personally been working on advancing the project since early 2010. I am supported by a strong Canadian leadership team and board of directors who see the importance of building a strong Northern Ontario-based company feeding supply chains that will benefit Canadians, including Indigenous peoples. It is worthwhile noting that our board representation includes a member of an OG Cree community located near our project. To give you an idea of current size, our recent preliminary economic assessment released in 2021 indicates a 26-year mine life, enough lithium chemicals to support the production of roughly 500,000 electric vehicles annually, and it contains a net present value on the project, or NPV, of $1.25 billion Canadian post-tax. We are currently growing our resource, and we are undertaking a pre-feasibility study on the project that will be released in 2022. The PAC project is a tier 1 global lithium resource here in North America, and it's top 3 resource in the world by quality. It is a resource that has attracted international interest. Perhaps more importantly, due to its size and purity, is the key to attracting cathode and battery production to Canada, and will support the battery electric vehicle supply chain on both sides of the border. It is by all definitions a strategic resource for Canada. It's important to acknowledge that in the advance of our business, we have been the fortunate recipients of government innovation funding, namely through Ontario's Invest North program, to help in the advancement of the chemical processing portion of our planned business. I understand the Standing Committee on Industry and Technology produced a comprehensive report on development of critical mineral supply chains last year. I am hoping my experience in bringing the PAC Lithium project towards production will be helpful to you in advancing at least some of your current areas of study, so that we can enhance Canada's response to this really critical and important issue. Canada is blessed with an abundance of critical minerals and well positioned to be a world leader in green technologies. To realize our competitive advantage on a world stage, however, we must answer a question. How do we use our advantages, overcome a myriad of domestic and business complexities, all within a time frame dictated by the market, while preserving value to shareholders and to strategic interests of Canadians more broadly? To do this, we have to understand what our advantages are, be honest about the complexities we face, understand the markets we're working within, revise our plan as required, and expedite its implementation. Given the time I have, I'll explore this question and walk through what I see possible solutions. In my mind, the advantages that Canada has are as follows: abundance of natural resources, minerals, water, energy, renewable energy, critical minerals like lithium on which the battery supply chains are dependent, proximity to supply chain and end users and market, such as car manufacturing in Ontario and Michigan, and of course, the North American market. Mature resource, financial sectors, skilled workforce, low relative costs of mining inputs, land, power, water, rule of law, political will, business-minded, Indigenous peoples, entrepreneurial spirit, and resolve. The complexities that I see include the fact that our critical mineral deposits are often remote, not proximal to infrastructure. We have become reliant on industry to permit, design, and fund their development. Mine development and processing, though predominantly a provincial jurisdiction, can be regulated federally, municipally, requires strong relationships and input from Indigenous people. It is very complex. Our regulatory systems, by their complexity and lack of timeliness, inhibit us from achieving the first to market advantage, jeopardize our ability to be leaders, and in some cases, even players. Unpredictable permitting timelines needed to permit the development of a mine, the infrastructure, locate and build chemical processing plants are a barrier, can leave mine developers financially weakened and at risk of being taken over by larger, often foreign-owned entities. We're facing that now.
Mr. Walker, I'll have to ask you to conclude. We're past the time.
Sure, no problem. So, really in conclusion, as I've said before, Canada is blessed with the abundance of critical minerals. We have to live up to our potential. We must advance beyond rhetoric and focus on timely, coordinated actions to overcome the barriers we are seeing right now. We need action.
Thank you very much, Mr. Walker. Merci. Je céderai maintenant la parole à messieurs Gratton.
Thank you. And now over to Mr. Gratton and Mr. Marshall, speaking for the Mining Association of Canada. Thank you very much. I am Pierre Gratton, the President and CEO of the Mining Association of Canada. I have with me my colleague, Brendan Marshall, Vice President of Economic and Northern Affairs.
It's important to differentiate between the two general categories of critical minerals at the heart of the supply chain security sustainability nexus: rare earth elements and clean energy materials. Materials from both categories are listed on Canada's critical minerals list, but the policy actions required differ. Nickel, cobalt, lithium, manganese, and graphite are the predominant battery minerals presently. Canada is in possession of all of these materials, some at production scale and others being developed. In the case of nickel, we've got world-leading up and downstream nickel extracting, smelting, and refining capacity. And we produce the second lowest carbon intensity nickel in the world. Relatively significant volumes of low-carbon cobalt are also produced in Canada. Manganese and graphite are produced at smaller volumes, while manganese, graphite, and lithium advanced projects are all in various stages of development. Being in possession of the minerals and metals needed for battery production, however, does not equate to having the capacity to produce value-added battery-grade materials. Canada does not, as of yet, manufacture battery-grade nickel, cobalt, graphite, or lithium, and all of its current production goes into other uses. To position ourselves for success, we need government policies like enhanced targeted public geoscience, increasing incentives for exploration of critical minerals to find new mines, reducing bottlenecks in the regulatory approval process, and incentivizing the production of value-added battery-grade materials that address the entire value chain. We also need to avoid unintended policy outcomes such as climate change actions that put Canada's current and future off-grid mines at risk, when those very mines supply the feed to grid-connected world-class smelters and refineries that export metals with the lowest carbon content in the world. Beyond battery minerals, a recent McKinsey report on critical minerals and clean technology identified 17 materials, including uranium, of which Canada is the second largest producer and without which getting to net zero is impossible, copper, zinc, and steel, coking coal, and iron ore, many of which are on Canada's critical minerals list. Without vastly expanded quantities of critical minerals, the desired carbon transition will never materialize, and the world is frankly better off on climate when they come from Canada because of our carbon advantage. No set of materials characterizes the security of supply dilemma more than rare earth elements, used in a wide range of essential battery, medical, energy, and advanced manufacturing applications. To date, China has dominated the market for these key materials, controlling a majority of production and distribution, and that's creating a global over-reliance on one country for procurement. Unlike battery minerals, Canada does not have a pre-existing supply chain for REEs, and has fewer established strengths in the space than with battery minerals. Canada has deposits, with companies seeking to develop them, and produces some rare earths as byproducts from the smelting processes of other metals. Much of the rest of the world is similarly import reliant on China and lacks a pre-existing world-leading mining industry to build upon. While more work needs to be done to establish an REE supply chain in Canada than a battery supply chain, Canada should not be deterred from doing so, and by leveraging its competitive advantages to create greater supply of REEs for domestic use and export. Doing so presents a significant opportunity for the country. Development of the critical mineral strategy presents an opportunity to solidify a recognition of the essential nature of Canada's mining industry to the government's broader climate change, clean technology, and reconciliation objectives. It'll position Canada as a reliable, secure, sustainable, critical mineral supply chain partner over the long term, while simultaneously increasing our domestic attractiveness as a destination for large-scale, sought-after, downstream clean technology manufacturing investments. The sooner these signals can be sent to the market, the greater Canada's overall proposition for these investments become. In the interest of time, we have distributed to you our key recommendations, which I will thus refrain from reading out to you, but Brennan and I both look forward to your questions. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur Gratton. Alors, pour notre dernier...
Thank you very much, Mr. Gratton. And for our last witness, Ms. Sarah Hood, the President and CEO of Propulsion Québec, you have 5 minutes. Thank you very much, and thank you to the members of the committee for this invitation to speak to you. I'm Sarah Hood. I'm President and CEO of Propulsion Québec, which is Canada's electric and intelligent transportation industry cluster. And on behalf of our some 250 members, I do, as I said, thank you for this invitation to present our vision of a Canada positioned as a responsible source of critical and strategic minerals, the CSMs, that's what I'll be calling it henceforth, and on developing the Canadian battery industry for electric vehicles. As has been said by the witnesses speaking before me, Canada occupies a unique position in the world. We have vast resources in SCMs, particularly those in high demand for the energy transition, clean technology deployment, and sustainable post-COVID-19 economic recovery, and has a recognized expertise in industrial development, well presented by Professor Dunn, who is a fine representative of that expertise. We are also recognized for expertise in responsible industrial development. Some of our energy mix is dominated by low-carbon, low-cost renewables. One of the world's most demanding environmental regulatory frameworks characterizes us as well, and we have a skilled workforce and, above all, a stable and predictable geopolitical context, which, of course, gives us competitive advantage, as others have said. So these strengths, in our view, can consolidate Canada's position as a safe, stable, and responsible or sustainable supplier of SCMs and battery components. These elements must be core to any sustainable strategy. If Canada is to succeed in developing these new industries, a fourth pillar must be added to the three I've mentioned, and that is a pan-Canadian strategy, so far lacking. Other major international players active in these sectors have already demonstrated their ability to organize. We have an advantage. No other regional entity is able to combine the natural resources, the technical and technological capacities needed to develop these resources, and the necessary financial capacity to develop these sectors across its own territory without domestic synergy. This is why it's of the utmost importance that the Canadian government play a role in coordinating the actions of all provinces and territories to create a vast Canadian alliance dedicated to the development of the SCM and battery sector, building on strengths and assets of each of them. Canada must take advantage of its historical position to coordinate across all the sectors, from the supply chain to advancing research and development, funding, and production, as well as a large group of specialists and an ability to export. Moreover, Canada must take advantage of its historical position as a U.S. ally and work towards a North American coalition allowing our batteries ecosystem to position itself as a secure, stable, and responsible supplier of value-added materials and components, not only raw materials, as others have pointed out. For the fast-growing electric vehicles market and the energy transition, among other sectors. Positioning is strategic, not here only here in North America, but also with regard to our European partners who are also betting on consolidation of their approaches and their components for their own electric vehicle and energy storage markets. Especially, so we should consolidate our strategic advantage in this regard as well. Canada has an economic opportunity that we cannot ignore, a unique opportunity, perhaps the greatest in our history so far. We need this economic opportunity as we aim for carbon neutrality by 2050. We need to ensure a transition of our economy to a low-carbon one and must take advantage of the economic opportunity now before us. This is an unusual chance given us to rebuild our economy on a new basis, ensuring our energy security, among other things, and playing an important role regionally across the North American continent and within the world. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Hood, for this evidence. And now I will go to the first round of questions. Ms. Tracy Gray for 6 minutes. Ms. Gray, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you very much to all the witnesses for being here. My first questions are for Dr. Lilly. Dr. Lilly, we've heard concerns raised now from a U.S. congressman on the neolithium purchase, and you did reference this purchase in your testimony today. There was an article today where Congressman Mike Waltz raised questions on whether Canada had even informed the Biden administration about the sale. Can you touch on the importance of Canada needing to communicate and collaborate with our allies when it comes to critical minerals and company acquisitions around this?
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm happy to answer the question. I didn't see today's news, but certainly it really is very important for Canada to consult with allies on major purchases. The United States is our closest trading partner and our historic ally. With the United States in particular, when it comes to critical minerals, there are a few essential issues. One is that the United States takes a very broad view of what national security is or isn't, and it takes the position that domestic industry and threats to domestic industry represent national security threats. And so for that reason, it's very important for Canada to ensure that any sales or major transactions that we're engaged with, with other partners aren't going to in any way jeopardize that relationship. The other piece that's really important, I think, in this case is around the rule of origin in autos, because we have an integrated auto supply chain. And so the United States in particular has interests in how that supply chain is developing as electric vehicle batteries are developed. And so I think it's really important that Canada consults with the United States on these issues, and we don't know the extent to which that did or didn't occur in the case of this particular sale.
Great, thank you. Dr. Lilly, my next question is, we're the only country in the Five Eyes group who has not restricted Huawei, and we heard that there was not an Investment Canada Act extra 45-day security review. Now, I recall the former U.S. trade representative putting forward trade challenges against Canada while calling Canada a, quote, national security threat. If Canada were not collaborating with our allies on national security concerns like critical minerals, are you concerned about any potential repercussions?
I am concerned, and this is the issue I tried to touch on previously, is that the United States, using Section 301, takes a much broader view of national security than many countries do, and this is the reason for which Canada came under national security tariffs under the previous administration, because it was ruled that domestic steel and aluminum industries in the United States were vital to the national security of the United States. This issue is not something that we can litigate at the WTO or elsewhere. It is part of American law, and we can't challenge it, really. And so for that reason, it really is quite vital. We can and should challenge it as a country, but the United States' use of these measures is not something that we can effectively challenge using major multilateral fora. And so for that reason, I think it's really quite critical that we constantly remain in touch with the Americans on these issues and try to work together when we can.
Great, thank you. Dr. Lilly, I want to ask you about access to critical minerals and its geopolitical effects, and how China presently has a commanding position in critical minerals. What risks do you foresee for Canada if one country has such a dominant control of supply chains on critical minerals?
Well, it is never in Canada's interest for any country to have a dominant role in any supply chain, including in this area, but particularly because the sector is changing so much right now. There's lots of movement. Many countries want a piece of this. It's really, there are a number of potential risks. With the case of China in particular, we've seen in the past that it has willingly used its control over certain parts of the critical mineral supply chain to restrict access to global partners. In the past, that has been challenged at the WTO successfully. China did comply with the ruling and prices were stabilized again. However, as we've seen, we know that China does not always observe the rule of law, and there are certain areas of international law that we have lots of examples to demonstrate that. And so I think that we need to be constantly aware of the dangers of one country in particular having control of the supply chain, and even more so when it's China.
Okay, thank you. And to tag on to that, do you think Canada should be strengthening its measures through things such as the Investment Canada Act, or are there other measures that you see to ensure that the IP and know-how we have right now in critical minerals is not lost to foreign state-owned enterprises?
Yes, I think that we should be using the Investment Canada Act more broadly. I was surprised that the recent transaction was not subject to national security review for the very reason that this was an extremely large transaction in a critical sector with a state-owned enterprise. I think that decision should have been revisited. So I would say that, yes, it's essential that we use that, and that we also work with allies on a much broader view around issues like intellectual property in international trade.
Thank you very much, Madam Gray and Professor Lilly. I'll now turn the floor to MP Dung for 6 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. I want to welcome all witnesses for coming to the committee today to answer some very important questions. My first question is to Professor Dung. You're one of the Canada top researcher, and you're working with Tesla Motors to improve the energy density, increase the safety, decrease the cost, and improve cycle and calendar life of the batteries. Um, in your view, what direction is this technology going globally?
The technology is going in a good direction. The cost is coming down, the lifetimes are becoming longer, the safety is becoming better. Everything's becoming better over time. So I really don't know how to answer your question other than that, except to tell you things are getting better all the time.
Well, with all these positive signs, but to advance to the next stage, and what inputs from lithium processing and mining does Canadian industry need? Particularly, support from the government. Do you have any specific recommendations to the committee?
Well, I'm not sure I'm the right person to be answering that question. Probably others in the mining sector would be better. But all I know is that lithium in the ground and highly pure lithium carbonate or lithium hydroxide are not the same. And to go from one to the other requires a large, huge investment and a lot of know-how. And it's that missing step that I'm not 100% sure that we have in Canada. For example, Nemaska Lithium has partnered with Livent, which is a big US lithium producer. And I think that's probably a good thing in terms of getting the lithium out of the ground and into value-added materials as expeditiously as possible.
You mentioned there are very few manufacturing in Canada currently to support the growth of EV battery future in manufacturing. Give us a sense of how wide is the gap between what we have right now and where we want to go to achieve sort of a carbon neutral economy by 2050. That's what we propose to do.
Well, the gap is enormous. The governments have very nicely realized the importance of electric vehicles in eliminating tailpipe emissions. But at the same time, we have to be able to get more renewables onto the energy grid, solar and wind. And for that, we need energy storage, be it by batteries or by other means. So that whole part has been basically ignored so far at the same level of interest compared to electric vehicles. And I think the number of batteries that are going to be required for energy storage will be equal or greater to the number that are required for electric vehicles. So this is a place that the government needs to think about, how do we get rid of burning coal in Atlantic Canada? How do we get rid of burning oil to heat our homes and so forth? So there's a huge challenge going forward.
Right. So the reason why I'm asking all these questions is that now we realize that there is quite a bit of gap between the raw material or critical minerals that we're studying right now, and to product actually the industry or the market is requiring or demanding right now in Canada. So is it not true that we need to develop this industry and the market first, that we can use these we can use these critical minerals in Canada? Is that true that we need to kind of focus on to develop that industry first before we do more to look at the critical minerals situation?
Oh no, I don't think that's right. The market is there at the moment. In my role with Novonix, we're developing energy storage projects for residential homes, and to try to get lithium-ion batteries for those products from tier one manufacturers is virtually impossible. You go to them and they say, we're sold out till 2024. And you say, well, you're expanding your gigafactories left and right. And they say the output from those is sold out till 2024, 2025. There's such a demand for lithium-ion cells. It's incredible. And, I think if you build a factory in Quebec or wherever, the output will be snapped up.
Thank you. My next question goes to Mr. Walker. Mr. Walker, it was very interesting to hear you give us the update on what you do up in Northern Ontario. And I have read about ethical environmental concerns surrounding the critical mineral mines around the globe. What engagement and partnership with the Indigenous community have you taken in Northern Ontario? And do you think that Canada can be a leader in mining ethical source of critical minerals?
And we have time for a very brief answer, Mr. Walker.
Sure. Excuse me. Yeah, we've ourselves at Frontier Lithium have taken very active and early steps to engage Indigenous communities in proximity to this world-class jurisdiction that we're operating in. We've developed exploration agreements for early to advanced stage exploration, which really form the basis of foundation for future agreements to cover production scenarios. So it's a process, takes time, building trust. We've got very good relationships. Now, the second part of your question really talks about building a brand, and absolutely, in simple terms, I know there's not much time. When we think about the circle of life, it correlates very well to the concept of recycling and reuse, which really forms the basis of the purpose of energy storage. So based on that,
Mr. Walker, I hate to have to cut you off again. My apologies for that, but hopefully you'll have time in the next round of questioning. Je passerai maintenant la parole à Monsieur Lemire pour 6 minutes.
I now recognize Mr. Lemire, 6 minutes. Thank you, Chair, and thank you to all our witnesses. I sincerely tell you that this is one of the most interesting meetings we've had for a while. The contents of the evidence you've given us should really be shared broadly. I think it's of great interest to all Quebecers and all Canadians. My question is for Ms. Hood of Propulsion Quebec. I would like to know a bit more about the strategy. Could you give us some details? And what are your expectations of a Canadian strategy? And what do you see the federal government's role in it being? Right now, the dynamic of federal-provincial interactions, and with regard to Quebec as well. You could comment on that. Do you have any worries? And could you give us some idea of what you mean by the opportunities available to us? Thank you so much. As other witnesses have said, we are in a global race. The demand, the people knocking on the doors, I can't tell you how many there are, all about electric vehicles. And the entire supply chain will be swamped by the demand. And if our enterprises need to deal with Asian suppliers, for example, we're just one small order and lost in an enormous barrel of orders. We may find ourselves sidelined. We may not be able to benefit from the economic growth underway, and we won't be able to profit from it. Other countries are organizing themselves. This is a historic transition point requiring deep planning and deep coordination. And that's what the federal government should turn its collective mind to. That's what I feel. By developing an industrial policy across the board and at all levels, research and development, recognizing where we may win and focus our efforts there, where we have competitive advantages. Others have given examples. All of these need to be strung together into a highly strategic plan. Ensuring that we move quickly as well to support the enterprises in this sector. It's not a technologically mature sector. It's growing as we speak. We need to continue to remain out front in research and development. For advanced technology, a number of trainings are not available across Canada in our universities, for example. Research and development isn't underway everywhere it could be. There's so many challenges. It was just a big open field that the federal government should turn its mind to, that we need to use properly. But what's good is that Canada has provinces with specific strengths, and each province could take advantage of this situation and complement the works and the work and specializations of others. So this is a rare opportunity for the federal government to draw all this together and have a real effect on the overall effect. So I understand that it's not too late, but that we are a little behind the times. And when it comes to low carbon transitions, you know, we can see how important that's going to be. Just taking the numbers of trucks parked running outside of Parliament right now as an example. So could we support in a more serious way a transition in Quebec and across Canada to a low-carbon electric vehicle economy? Yes, we could. In Quebec, we're not building cars. So these vehicles will be in great demand in the future. There's going to be much more demand for smart technology in our vehicles, especially individual passenger vehicles, private vehicles. So a number of public policies could be adopted. The zero emissions laws, yes. This is a project that we already have in Quebec for our fleets. And using this approach has really accelerated the adoption of electric vehicles in Quebec, at least. So that's a new approach that can be used as well to encourage supply and demand. I do hear that you're saying we should adopt a law on zero emissions as quickly as possible. So what can we do to support the various parts of the supply chain in battery development and production? Do you think that intermediary transformation enterprises could be useful to refine the minerals, for example, and feed into the new types of components needed based on research? Yes, we shouldn't be sending our strategic resources overseas and outside of Canada to be processed there. We need to keep processing here, for example, building batteries in Quebec, and then integrating them into vehicles built in Ontario, linked into the North American vehicle industry in Ontario and in Michigan then. So yes. Moreover, this hasn't mentioned, but there's the whole issue of battery recycling that should be backed as well. Thank you so much, Ms. Wood and Mr. Libia. And now on to Mr. Massey for 6 minutes.
Thank you to our guest. Back to Mr. Don. One of the challenges that the industry had at the very beginning when moving to electric battery was the discussion, and almost like sometimes a false argument or a phony argument about range, because there was a perception that you needed to have 400, 600 kilometers of range, and most consumers only go 50 to 60 kilometers around their immediate neighborhoods and so forth. But it led to kind of a really big innovation period to increase the range. And I know, though, Tesla has been the advancement of some of this, but most recently, I think because of supply reasons, they're actually going to be providing another vehicle line with less range in a battery. Can you maybe outline the difference between the two and in the quality of the minerals resources for that? That's my understanding as to kind of the status quo.
Okay, thank you for that question. That's a really nice one. Yeah, so the moderate range, lower cost vehicle will be based on a battery chemistry based on lithium iron phosphate. And this is really quite good because iron and phosphorus are highly abundant and very sustainable. Another good thing about that technology is that it supports many, many charge-discharge cycles and many, many years of life, so that those batteries in those vehicles could be used for things like vehicle to grid. The vehicle, when parked, could be storing energy from the grid when the sun is shining or the wind is blowing, and at night or when the wind is not blowing, deliver it back. So this is, I think, is a really good move. You know, and those vehicles still get a pretty decent range, probably 400 kilometers. And then the other side of the coin is the extremely long range vehicle, 600 kilometers or so, that uses more nickel-based positive electrode materials. Higher cost. People are actually worried about, in the longer term, the long haul, beyond 2035, even about availability of nickel. So, you know, this is a concern. You know, Tesla's going to be around for who knows how much longer, a century? I don't know. But they're concerned about availability even of nickel as electrification just, you know, goes up on a giant hockey stick curve. And so I think it's really good to see the two streams of the technologies coming along, that each has a place. And I think many consumers are gonna vote with their wallet and go for the lower range, lower cost vehicle that's going to last a really long time.
Yeah, and I mean, even the argument for combustible engines, I mean, there's still a place for them, in my opinion, for different types of travel and vehicles that we have at the current moment. Maybe there'll be a day when that fully transitions out. Maybe I don't know if you can answer this question. If you can't, it's okay. I've always been curious about, as we do research and development partnerships, I know that, say, for example, where I'm from, the University of Windsor and others have been doing so. Is there an interest for Canada to help also get transferable technology in this into other types of devices? And that we're finally starting to see, as consumers, them become more involved in lawn equipment and other types of e-vehicles and so forth. I just kind of curious, because you're in the academia background and so forth. I always believe that's kind of being kind of put on the sideline for some reason right now, because obviously the trucks, the cars, and the newest models are always the sexy things out there. But when you're talking about lawnmowers and, you know, cutting devices and all kinds of yard work stuff too, you're also reducing emissions. And I just not sure whether that area is getting the attention, or perhaps we could actually carve out a special niche for other types of vehicles and mechanizations.
Well, it's quite likely. You know, one thing about these electric powered yard machines, they're incredible. I don't know if you own one, but no,
I don't at this time. I've been looking at it.
They're awesome. Yeah. No oil changes, no gas. Yep. You know, it's incredible. They're so great. So I have electric lawnmower and so on. It's awesome. Yeah, but in Quebec, there's all kinds of companies, and Sarah can talk about this, that make things like electric snowmobiles and electric jet skis and whatever the heck, electric recreational vehicles. There's all kinds of things happening in Quebec that are really quite fascinating in the non-traditional electric vehicle, electric truck space.
Yeah, and see, I use a cord because, like, I just don't want to store gas on my property. I know what happens as an environmental movement and stuff I've been working on to get pesticides off lawns and so forth. But if I end up filling up and spilling gas and oil and all kinds of different things, I do so much more damage. So these are the things that are really important. I'm going to switch questioning just because I only have 6 minutes, if I can, to go to Miss Lilly. With regards to your testimony, after this, I mean, he did say with his government at the time of 2015 that they would bring in more transparency to the Investment Canada Act. I understand that we're going to have some barriers for some of those transactions that take place, but if you could, I don't know if you can you give us a measurement as what's more transparent? I haven't seen it. I've been around for a little while and I'm not seeing a difference. And I asked the minister, quite frankly, for this, and he didn't really get to my answer to the satisfaction I'd like to know, have heard. But I really want to know if you view that there's more transparency from the past, and if not, then what could we do? I think that would actually be a lot more reassuring if we actually had a little bit more transparency, or a third-party review process for transparency. That would give more confidence, I think, than what just took place in this agreement that we're looking at.
Mr. Massé, Professor Lilly, I'm sorry, we have time for like a 15-second answer.
Okay, so you know what, Mr. Chair, I'll let this sit. I did this last week. Sorry, again, my 2 minutes later, and I'll give it to Ms. Lilly to fully answer later on. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
Probably wise. Thank you, Mr. Massé. So we now turn to Mr. Cram for 5 minutes.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you to all the witnesses for being here today. I'm going to have to ask Professor Dawn from Dalhousie University to maybe turn our committee room into a classroom for a little while, because it's been a while since some of us, including myself, have taken high school and university chemistry class. So I understand lithium is an element on the periodic table, but can you expand a little bit on what is the difference between lithium carbonate and lithium hydroxide?
Yeah, sure. Lithium carbonate is a chemical that's used to make some of the positive electrode materials for lithium-ion batteries. So it's a combination of lithium, carbon, and oxygen. And it has some very nice properties in that it's quite stable in the air and relatively moisture insensitive. Lithium hydroxide is a combination between lithium, oxygen, and hydrogen. It's usually sold in a hydrated form, lithium hydroxide monohydrate. And it's also used in the production of usually positive electrode materials that have large amount of high nickel content. So these two materials are the most common materials used in the synthesis of the positive electrode materials for the lithium-ion battery.
And so if I wanted to manufacture lithium-ion batteries, could I use lithium carbonate or lithium hydroxide as an input for the process?
If you were making, say, very high nickel content positive electrode materials, you would naturally pick lithium hydroxide. If you were making low nickel content materials, you would pick lithium carbonate. So there's uses for both, and you can convert one into the other if you have to. It's preferable probably not to do that.
All right, and so which one would be preferable for the batteries? The one with the high nickel content or the low nickel content?
Well, this again comes to the area of, energy density. High nickel materials will provide larger energy density cells, so that translates to larger driving range. But typically those materials would give a shorter charge-discharge cycle life, or hence a shorter total driving distance for your vehicle. Whereas low nickel content materials would have smaller energy density, which would mean a shorter driving range on a single charge, but a longer calendar lifetime typically. So as an example, Volkswagen uses a material that would be synthesized with lithium carbonate, and Panasonic, which supplies Tesla, would use a material that's synthesized with lithium hydroxide.
So if you were to provide some advice to us as policymakers, which is why we have you at the committee today, sir, should we be concerned about Canada's supply of both lithium carbonate and lithium hydroxide?
Well, I think the lithium producers are able to decide, okay, I'm going to make a carbonate plant or a hydroxide plant. I don't think it's that difficult. And maybe maybe Trevor can get me right here. I don't think it's that difficult to have both on site. If you want, make one, make the other, either way. But the key is to get one or the other from lithium in the ground.
All right, and I believe in response to one of the earlier questions, you said that the industry is always improving and we're moving in the right direction. Can you speak to a little bit about the cost of deriving lithium from lithium carbonate or lithium hydroxide? Is it more expensive to get it from one or the other?
It's not significantly different.
Okay. And how much time do I have left, Mr. Chair?
You have 1 minute.
I have 1 minute. Okay, well then I guess I would like to move over to Mr. Walker from Frontier Lithium. Mr. Walker, you said you've been working in this industry a long time. Can you give us an idea of some of the regulations that a new mining operation would have to go through to go from the discovery of some new elements in the ground to actually extracting them and mining them?
Sure. Yeah. No. Absolutely. And before I dive into that, quickly agreed with Mr. Don. We are looking at a dual process to produce both lithium carbonate and lithium hydroxide. we do see a cost advantage to produce direct from what we're blessed with in Canada in hard rock assets directly to the production of lithium hydroxide over our peers or competitors in South America that have some cost advantage going direct to from brines to retention ponds to then produce lithium carbonate. So just to finish off on that, with regards to your question about, what does it take to get into production? As I alluded into the opening statement,
Mr. Walker, I am so sorry it always falls on you, but the time is up. So hopefully MPs ask their first questions to you next time. So
sure.
But thank you. And I now have to turn to Mr. Fillmore for 5 minutes.
Thanks, Chair, and I just want to extend a warm thanks and welcome to each of the witnesses today. Thank you for sharing your time and knowledge with us. A special hello to Professor Don from Dalhousie here in Halifax. Jeff, it's great to see you. I remember the day I visited your lab and you surgically unwrapped a battery, showing me exactly how it works, and that stuck with me today. So thank you for that, and thank you for being here today. I want to come back to you with a question, Jeff, but first I want to address Ms. Lilly. Ms. Lilly, it's not evident from your testimony that it's actually been several years since you've been a conservative staffer in the Prime Minister's office of Stephen Harper. You made it sound much more recent than that. But I was wondering if I could ask you, do you have any knowledge of how many Investment Canada Act investigations were undertaken by Prime Minister Harper's government relative to the current government?
Mr. Chair, thank you for the question. I don't think that I commented on my time working in the Prime Minister's office, but yes, it's a matter of factual record that I previously served in the Prime Minister's office of Stephen Harper. No, Mr. Fillmore, I can't comment, do not know the answer to your question, the number of reviews undertaken by his government versus the current government.
Thank you, Ms. Lilly. It's 4 times as many by the current government as happened under the previous government, four times as many of these investigations. So I want to be very clear that our government closely reviews every foreign transaction involving critical minerals. That very much included neolithium. So when the Conservatives are saying that no security review took place, that's absolutely false. The Conservatives are at best playing with language. They're cherry picking a specific technical step further down the review process. That step is only triggered after we look at a proposed investment in great detail and determine that there is or is not a national security
Point of order, Mr.
risk.
Chair.
Our thorough review involves
Just a moment, Mr. Fillmore. There is a point of order, Mr. Fast.
Mr. Chair, I believe it's within your power to focus the comments and the interventions of our members on the witnesses at hand. This is serious business. We heard that this may be the greatest economic opportunity we've ever seen as a country. I don't believe this is the place for political harangues from my colleague, Mr. Fillmore. If he wants to do that, he can do that outside of this committee. But right now, we've got serious witnesses at this table that should be asked serious questions. So I leave it to you, Mr. Chair. I trust you to act wisely. But remember, relevance is important here. That's one of the things you need to call this committee to focus on, the relevance of the comments and the questions.
Thank you, Mr. Fast. I will leave it to members to use their time as they see fit, and I do this with all parties. And Mr. Fillmore, you can resume as long as it's pertaining to the study at hand, to the matter at hand. So, Mr. Fillmore, you have 3 minutes left.
Thank you, Chair, and I appreciate the intervention from Mr. Fast, and I agree with this is a very serious matter, and I won't go any further on that line. I mean, this is very serious. This is a matter of science as well. Science is based in facts, so I wanted to make sure the record reflected the facts in this case. So with my remaining time, I'd like to come back to Professor Don, if I could. I was enjoying the conversation with Mr. Cram about lithium carbonate versus lithium hydroxide. And I was wondering on the energy density question, what do you think in your world is the future of battery storage? Is it in fact the high density batteries or is it the lower density batteries?
My view is maybe a little bit orthogonal to many other scientists and researchers. My view is that the future is in the longest lived batteries possible, okay? So that you minimize the need for recycling. You install a battery in an energy storage facility and it lasts 40 years or 50 years, not 10. You install a battery in a vehicle and it can be used for vehicle to grid, couple charge discharges cycles per day while the car is parked. You still get 15 years out of the vehicle. And at the end of that time, you can repurpose the battery for something else. And those batteries may not be the highest energy density batteries that you could possibly make. They'll still be able to drive a car 400 kilometers or so. And I think this is the way things should go. You know, we should be making batteries that are the most useful for society, not a battery that makes a sexy car go 600 kilometers. That's my opinion.
Okay, so for example, the wall packs that we're going to be seeing more and more of, thanks, Chair, that will contribute to a smart grid, energy sharing, and all that might be at this longer term.
Yeah,
okay.
That's what you want.
I wish I had a little bit more time from Mr. Gratton. The gap between where we are in terms of the extraction of lithium in Canada and where we need to get to. Any thoughts or direction you would have? And I think I probably have about 40 seconds here. You're muted, I'm afraid, Mr. Gratton.
We have one lithium mine in Canada, so we've got a long way to go. There's a lot of lithium deposits across the country. We need to attract the capital and to start developing them. So, but lithium is just one of the materials, one of the many materials that go into a battery. We're much stronger on some of the other elements that go into batteries, and we also need to capitalize on that advantage.
Thanks very much.
Merci, Monsieur Gratton, Monsieur Fillmore. Je passerai maintenant la parole.
Thank you, Mr. Gratton and Mr. Fillmore. Now we go over to Sébastien Lemire for 2.5 minutes. Thank you, Chair. My question is for Mr. Benoit Lassalle, whom I invited to join this committee 8 or 9 months ago, kind of to ring the bell so we'd wake up and realize how urgent investment in strategic minerals is. And now I would like to hear you on this. Now that we've heard about Canada's interest in this matter, what do you think the federal government has been doing and what more it could do to fund the sector? Well, so far it's non-existent. Really? Indeed. And I also want to say more about that. The race is really launched. Last week, Serbia withdrew Rio Tinto's permit for one of the largest lithium mines in the world to extract from it. They used the excuse about the environment, but everyone knows it's repositioning access to a strategic materials. Many countries are operating this way. When transactions take place in Quebec, I had told our politicians here in our province, well, do you think that we Canadians can go buy a lithium mine in Australia? Do you think they'll just sell it to us? Never. So the federal government must set up a policy, an overall policy across the board. I'm looking at Quebec's approach. Very nice. We want to electrify the grid and so on. But we're totally forgetting that we need the minerals to do so. You can't just let the minerals go out the back door while you've got this front window display about electrification. There are mines that we have that people want to buy 100%. They'll overpay to buy our graphite mines. Chinese don't want to sell us cathodes and battery packs. They want to sell us the full electric vehicle, 18,000 or 20,000 each, as many as big pens. We're selling our material to those who are making the lithium-ion batteries for Volkswagen and so on and so forth. They want to stop selling the anodes and the cathodes. They want to sell the full cars. They've told us that. They've made it very clear. Thus, they're trying to enter into long-term contracts for an ongoing and stable supply of raw materials. If they're able to control raw material supply, as they have in Australia with uranium. They shut down the entire uranium market in Australia. They tried to buy it out completely. Why? Because they know that that's going to be an essential element just around the corner. And what are we doing? We're selling. We're losing electric ion capacity in Ontario if we can't integrate what we're doing. Don't think that Tesla builds its own batteries. Thank you very much, Mr. Lassalle. I know that it goes so fast. Now over to Mr. Massé for 2.5 minutes.
Mr. Chair, and I would like to have Ms. Lilly answer my previous question. But before I do so, I just want to put some context about a witness being here. I'm a New Democrat, but also under the Harper administration, my right to repair bill got done, banning of microbeads got done, the Gordie Howe Bridge got done, my genocide recognition of Srebrenica was passed in the House of Commons, which is now in the Canadian Museum of Human Rights. My international bridge and tunnel work got done, and invasive carp banning, actually for evisceration of the border, got done, just to name a few things. So if you had anything to do with any of those things, I want to thank you for that. I'd like to turn over the next couple of minutes for you to answer the question with regards to see whether we're having more transparency or also improvements with the Investment Canada Act over the last few years, because I'd like to see some improvements in that. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Thank you for the question. I'd like to clarify that I'm here in a nonpartisan capacity. I'm a published author in the area of national security reviews for critical minerals. And so that is why I'm here today as a professor of international trade, respected in my own right. On the issue of transparency, I support transparency, of course, and I think the government should be as transparent as they can be while safeguarding national security. The extent to which the national security process has become more open, I couldn't say in an objective way, because I just simply haven't followed it systematically. But I think that what is really essential for governments when in order to maintain the ability to keep aspects of the national security review confidential, because there's times when I do think there are details that are important to remain confidential. I think that governments need to maintain trust and need to ensure that they're implementing their own due diligence and following their own guidelines. And so I think some of the concern in this particular case, and I did review the testimony where you asked the minister those questions, is that some very basic details weren't being answered. But also, I think that the fact that this did not go to a full national security review, it was stopped at the initial screening stage, meant that some questions were raised about the extent to which the government's full due diligence was followed. And when those questions arise, trust starts to erode in institutions, and as trust erodes, that creates problems with public trust as well.
Okay, thank you, Mr. I think that's all of my time.
Yes, it is. Merci. Thank you very much, Professor and MP Mas. I now turn to Mr. Généreux pour 5 minutes.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Merci.
You have 5 minutes. Thank you, Chair, and thank you to the witnesses. So where do the Tesla's batteries come from, Mr. Lassalle? From Panasonic. It depends on the agreements, of course, but Panasonic in Japan, and Japan buys the anodes from a company in China. You said at the outset, in your opening remarks, in the evidence you gave us, that the sale you were discussing has been totally unacceptable. Why? Well, because right now it's not making waves, not making it for an obvious problem, because we're not building any batteries in Canada and Quebec. But when we will, you know, there are 240 battery making plants being constructed around the world right now. How many in Canada? So look at the Benchmark Minerals site. It's really the think tank about batteries. It explains there what's being built. If we had a plant, and I think it was Ms. Hood who was saying that the demand is just over the top. If we had a plant, well, indeed, each plant needs about one full mine of graphite and lithium and so on. And that site I just mentioned will explain that to you. You just said that Mr. Don has just told us that lithium can be transformed in 2 different ways, can be processed in different ways. Well, of course, Mr. Don is a world recognized specialist, but when it lithium, if you have hard rock, like in Canada, that's, a hard mineral, and you can create a Y that goes into a carbonate or to a hydroxide. That's basically how it works. We, in Quebec, what I was trying to buy was, the hard lithium, the earth lithium, and we wanted to create a lithium carbonate, because that costs a little less, hydroxide being for more specialized batteries, as has been explained. In South America, they're starting from a different point, because the lithium isn't, a earth lithium, it's a salt. So it's all about the chemistry of it. But right now in Quebec, if we were to build a battery plant, we would need to find the lithium to supply it, nickel, manganese, and all that. But we do have that in Canada, yes? So why couldn't we create companies that would build batteries right here in Canada? Well, look, hang on. We're not yet producing lithium. We likely will be producing it in Ontario, yes. But I'm telling you that we can't sell the deposits. We can't be selling the deposits. That's what I'm saying, because we will be needing it. Yes, but how about in Abitibi? Yeah, but we sold that to the Australians. That's what we sold to the Australians. They'll take that out and they'll bring it over to Australia. They're not going to be giving it to us. You got it. It's like a mask. When we needed masks, everyone was looking around to see what masks they had around them. Same thing for lithium, graphite, nickel. Everyone's looking for it. Because the technological revolution now underway, it's kind of like back in 1907 with the Rockefellers and Ford and the use of fossil fuels. Same paradigm shift. So here's my point. Keep the resources. Step one, keep the resources. And let's go for an integrated, coherent approach. It's like, finding oil in 1907. You decide to keep it, like Saudi Arabia decided to keep its. Is it too late, or have we still got some time? I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, Mr. Généreux. Mr. Graton, Mr. Marshall, I'm not sure if they have some answers for the Mining Association of Canada. Are we too far behind the times in Canada? Could we still ramp up and supply that demand? 1907 is a long time ago, but, it's something like that right now. What are we going to do about it? Well, I wouldn't say that we're too far behind. We have advantages that other countries don't have when it comes to envisaging battery production, given that we do have the minerals here. We have some strong enterprises. We have foundries. We have smelting operations, refining operations, quite a bit, actually, which other countries don't. That said, we need an overarching strategy, and we need to move fast. I do believe that Quebec is way out ahead, quite a bit out ahead than other provinces and territories of Canada, and they do have a strategy, and they're really working on it. I would like to see the rest of Canada do likewise. I am optimistic. I do believe that the federal government will take action shortly in a real way, but that remains to be seen. But of course, the race is on, and we have to move fast. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Généreux, Mr. Graton. And now I recognize MP Erskine-Smith, 5 minutes.
Thanks, Terrell. I want to stick with the Mining Association of Canada. I appreciate you sending very concrete and specific recommendations, and I took from those recommendations in part the federal government's role is to streamline the approval. They are an active participant in the course of consultation and ensuring that things proceed. I think reference to the Impact Assessment Act. One piece around financing. I understand the need for the federal government to facilitate approvals. Given the increase in the value of these commodities, to what extent is financing required from the federal government? And I know in particular the call for doubling the exploratory tax credit. To what extent is that still required?
So that's I appreciate that question. That was a platform commitment of your party. It's for the reasons that we've discussed to date, the committee's discussed today. This is a race doubling the mineral exploration tax credit for critical minerals would put Canada way out in front of every other country in the world as a target for exploration into those minerals and metals that we need. So it would give us a huge advantage. The METC has been an advantage
so on
for
that point,
Canada
just the market's going to do this presumably because of the cost of these the profit motivation here. But
yeah, but
this would expedite it in a real way.
No,
That's
it would make us more attractive than other places. You're right. The commodity prices are going to stimulate more exploration into these materials worldwide, but where they go worldwide is an open question. The METC would make sure Canada, which always is near the top, would remain the top and would frankly overtake countries like Australia, which compete for us for top spot.
Right. Okay. And in terms of the timeline for bringing it's been told to us by a number of witnesses, the operation in Quebec, but there really aren't many active operations across the country, despite the potential here. And so how many years are we looking to bring a mining operation online that would contribute to what we all want?
Well, yeah, building a new mine, it takes time. So like what our brief focuses on is we really need to look at every stage of the value chain. We need to have more discoveries. There's been a dearth of base metal exploration in Canada for the last 15, 20 years. There's been a dearth worldwide. It's not because Canada hasn't been attracting it. Until this battery explosion, they weren't attractive. People were looking for other materials. Now it's starting to pick up. But as a result of that lack of exploration, we don't know where those new mines are. We need to accelerate that. So we need more public geoscience. We need to track more exploration. And then there's the building the project itself. And the regulatory process is time consuming. I think there's probably a role.
Just in terms of time. Well, yeah, just in terms of timeline, because if we're making recommendations to government around this overarching strategy, you've indicated we need this overarching strategy. That timeline presumably has a lot to bear upon the ultimate strategy.
It definitely does. It can take from discovery to construction. It can take as long as 10 years. It depends on where. It depends on what. It depends on the level of Indigenous support for the project. Sure. There's a range of factors. Some can get permitted faster than that. It really, really depends. There's no, specific answer how long will a project take, but it takes.
That's fair. A long time, and we need to do everything we can to speed it up.
That's right.
Right. And a question for Mr. Don, and I don't know if Ms. Hout is still with us. We heard from a witness at a previous meeting just about the need to have a resilient supply chain, and Canada doesn't need to be the only player when it comes to mining. That there are lots of different ways we can contribute throughout the supply chain, and where can Canada best contribute? I don't know if you have a view in terms of an overarching strategy where Canada can best contribute in terms of the supply chain.
Yeah, you really should be talking to the mining guys about this, in my opinion. I think we can really contribute a lot in lithium, graphite, nickel, iron, phosphorus, all these minerals. We have them, right? We just have
and Sarah, do you have a view of where, not just in relation to mineral exploration, but in relation battery supply chain? I mean, this is a supply chain here for EVs that is a lot of different players in the supply chain. Where can Canada best contribute?
En 10 secondes, Madame Hood.
Je dirais pas. 10 seconds, please. I wouldn't say that necessarily, well, it can take 10 years for exploration to actually bear fruit. And then you have to think of marketing, of ordering all the equipment to be able to market broadly and ramp up. I think producing batteries, yes, that's something that we can play into, and integrating them into electric vehicles. So actually manufacturing all sorts of electric vehicles. Those that Professor Don has mentioned, for example, that could be done in Quebec. Thank you.
For 5 minutes.
Thank you very much. And thank you to all the witnesses for appearing here. Many of you are familiar to me, so welcome. I wanted to begin by just restating the statement that Ms. Oud made, that this may be the greatest economic opportunity in our history. which really drives home the point that this study that we're doing is really, really important. Professor Don, thank you for describing the difference between lithium carbonate and lithium hydroxide and why they're used in two different battery applications. And I drew from your comments that it's as much about the performance characteristics of the battery as anything else that would drive a choice, whether it's going to be one or the other. Am I correct?
Basically, it's really that to synthesize the high nickel materials at elevated temperature, you have to use the lithium hydroxide. And the lower nickel content materials, you can get away with lithium carbonate, which is a bit cheaper. So that's what you do.
Okay, but it's wrong to suggest that lithium carbonate is irrelevant to the lithium ion battery industry.
Oh yes, absolutely. Lithium carbonate is not irrelevant.
Okay, well, I'm glad you've now debunked something that was stated here by Mr. Fillmore and by others. I do want to go to Miss Lilly, or Professor Lilly, Dr. Lilly. Nice to see you again. Going back to the whole notion of national security, our critical minerals and rare earths, they are a national security, they are subject to national security risks, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
If someone suggests that sourcing lithium from anywhere other than Canada would eliminate that risk, would you agree with that assessment?
No, I don't think I would. I mean, circumstances vary, but sourcing, we source lithium from outside Canada all the time.
Well, yeah, and that goes to now another question to Professor Don. You mentioned there are two companies in Canada that manufacture lithium-ion batteries. They're not for the EV industry, but they are lithium-ion batteries, correct?
That's correct.
And where do they source their lithium?
I really don't know the answer to that, but you know, I imagine Electrovaya would source from a North American supplier like Livent, most likely. E1 Moly's manufacturing facilities are in Taiwan at the moment. They're trying to reestablish manufacturing in Canada. The Taiwan plant is probably sourcing their lithium supply from China, I would imagine.
If a lithium-ion battery plant were established for the EV industry today in Canada, to any of our witnesses, could they source lithium from Canada today?
No.
All right, so we've got our answer to that. So we have to source our lithium, at least in the short to medium term, from outside of the country. So back to Professor Lilly. Why is it that we should be approving the sales of Canadian companies that are actually mining lithium elsewhere around the world when we have such a risk that that particular resource will be monopolized perhaps by one global power?
Whether we should or shouldn't is something that I think deserves a lot of study. And so in the case of this particular mine in Argentina that was sold, part of, and as you've intimated, part of the suggestion appeared to be that it was lithium carbonate rather than lithium hydroxide. And because this didn't have an immediate goal for Canadian companies, or at least those that officials talked to, it was deemed to be of less interest. To me, we should not be preemptively deciding the value or worth of these kinds of decisions potentially 10 years down the road today without full study. That is why we conduct full national security reviews. It gives time to fully consult and to fully understand the issues. And if that had occurred, the decision may still have been for the transaction to proceed, but we will never know because it didn't follow that path.
Thank you, Mr. Fast. This is all the time you have.
All right, thank you.
Time's up. Thank you. Now, Madame Lapointe for 5 minutes.
Merci, Monsieur le Président, et merci à tous les
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to all the witnesses with us today.
Monsieur Graton. In your opening statement, you stated that to position ourselves for success, we need good government policies with equally good policy outcomes. Can you expand on what industry needs from policymakers in government to help drive innovation and investments?
Sure, thank you. Thank you for the question. Nice to see you, Vivian. I've touched on the METC already and public geoscience, so maybe I'll leave those two issues aside. I've also touched on the need to sort of focus on accelerating the regulatory process. Let me then skip further downstream and talk about the fact that we don't produce the right kind of nickel. We produce a lot of nickel, but it's not the nickel that's used for batteries. And so I think one part of the strategy is how do we entice industry that is producing different types of nickel for which they have customers and no compelling need to change their customer base to switch and start producing nickel sulfide for the battery market. And that's an interesting policy question, I think. And I think that there's room there for government to say, look, it's in Canada's interest that you start producing this type of product. Our auto sector needs it, and our whole critical mineral strategy needs this gap filled. So how can we convince you as a partner to change gears? So I think that's a really important. You come from Sudbury, you've got two large nickel miners in the area that produce nickel and sell nickel worldwide. How do we convince them to set up a nickel sulfate plant in Canada? I think is a really good question, and I'm hopeful that we'll get some answers in the near future. So that would be another example of the kinds of policy steps I think that we need. I also would make the point too. In our view, there is a tendency to fixate on the battery itself, whereas there is an awful lot of economic opportunity from the exploration all the way through to the battery grade materials that go into a battery. And my concern is that if we just focus on trying to attract a battery plant, that battery plant will be importing materials from around the world. We haven't solved the critical minerals, we haven't solved the problem we're trying to fix, which is an over-reliance on China. We need to build from the bottom up, plug in the gaps that we currently have. And if we do that, then the battery manufacturers are going to want to set up shop in Canada because they'll have what it takes. So I think that there's a preponderance to just focus on the, that final battery plant as the be all and end all, but I don't think that's actually where the focus should be.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Graton. Mr. Walker, it's great to see a fellow Sudburian here today. I want to explore sustainability in the industry. So in your estimation, is Canada well positioned to support not only domestic supply for the mineral requirements of carbon neutrality, but also to support an increased global demand?
The answer to that, I would say, is yes. We're positioned very well, and to really connect to previous comments and your question, our advice is especially to the Ontario government, has been simple. Let's begin somewhere with some action on where do we have some leverage. Work with what we have. We're blessed with great resources. We are blessed in Canada with auto OEM production, for example. So how do we leverage? We've seen investment downstream, but I agree with Mr. Graton that we need more emphasis on some support and policy change to really leverage, again, the front end of the supply chain to fill in those missing links. I agree. If we don't fill them in, we will be cutting checks to downstream OEMs forever. When we get our act together on the front end of the supply chain, they will want to be here and have access to the North American market. We believe that we have the resources and the ability to scale with some support. In conclusion, we've got to act, and government is always hesitant to pick horses. In this case, we got to be really sharp about which horses need to be bet on so that we can make some true meaningful progress in the short term.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Walker. Monsieur Lemire, 2 minutes 30.
2.5 minutes, Mr. Lemire. Thank you, Chair. And once again, thank you to all witnesses, really. You're giving us very clear answers, and you've clearly worked so hard at this, and I really appreciate the work of Dr. Lilly, among others. Do we have the mining expertise that we're referring to, such that it could be integrated into an overarching strategy? And how could we help the industry overall integrate? First, Canada is recognized around the world for its expertise in mining, in mineral extraction. No issue there. I can assure you that we're respected around the world. I see that myself. And our expertise is really broad-reaching and very detailed, in-depth. So we're able to create, manage, and use to best advantage our own mines. How can we move now toward value-added products, be they lithium carbonates or hydroxides or graphites? Everything must be processed in order to be able to create the batteries. Right now, all this is over there in China, a lot of it in any case, but we have the expertise. We had sold something to the Australians, and there was a processing plant that was being built right beside that mine, and we never actually got it up and running. So there's a good example. We do have the expertise. The Government of Canada must support that, especially by funding debt, supporting debt. In France, they have that French Association for Development, and they've got backing. The Chinese have got backing over the top. So do others. We are a little hesitant, but if you've got a plant able to process, we've got the expertise. I've no doubt on that. We have the expertise here in Canada, and we'll be able to create our own plants. As for the mines, first and second transformation of the materials, and then you leave it up to the battery manufacturers to, come on over here and set up here with the battery-grade materials. That's what we need to be able to offer them, because it's that battery-grade material offer that's going to orient the way things go here. People are really on the warpath, especially the Germans, out there with the race on to get hold of the battery-grade materials and the raw materials. We need to do what the Europeans are doing. Thank you. We need to change directions. Thank you, Mr. Lessard and Mr. Lemire. And now I recognize Mr. Massé, 2.5 minutes.
Chair, I've long believed we need a national auto strategy like many other countries have. To Mr. LaSalle, I would like to go back to your original part of your testimony with the increase of prices, not only just with regards to lithium, but other components. Can you kind of detail that a little bit more in terms of when did you really see a surge take place? And I know this is just speculative, but do you anticipate that it'll be sustainability with that in the years to come? That's going to be really, I think, important for the investment. So perhaps you can shed a little more light on that, please.
Oui, Monsieur Massé, je vais répondre en français, mais
Yes, Mr. Massé, I'll respond in French, given that I began in French earlier. Yes, indeed. There was a kind of a break taken by everyone at the very outset of the COVID pandemic, but all the prices, collapsed, graphite, lithium. We really felt that slowdown because the automobile sector and all the energy storage, electricity storage sector, just as important as the electric vehicle sector, sort of took a break. About 8 months into that, you could feel it reviving. And cobalt started costing a bit more, as did copper. And we were saying, okay, now lithium, all the lithium products were kind of dead. Mont Blanc decided to stop production because the price was just too low on the market. But we said, no, you know, it's going to just surge eventually. And 8 months ago, it did. 500%, carbonate 700%, and that's going to be the case ongoing. Benchmark mineral explains the supply and demand, and there's a real extraordinary large gap between supply and demand for lithium, graphite, nickel, copper. We're not discussing copper here, but to keep everyone electrified, we're going to need copper wiring. So there's an extremely high demand for that as well. And the current prices will remain as high as they are, and that's justified. We, business people, project managers, we don't need funding to carry out exploration. We're able to manage that. Mining as well, we're able to do that. And then we'll move into the processing in partnership with the government to turn out the processed materials. There's a lot going on. We just need more elbow room. We have to ensure that projects are found by us, developed by us, and sold to us. You know, Australians buying projects in Canada, not a good picture. Thank you. I'm so sorry we've run out of time again.
5 minutes.
Great, thank you, Mr. Chair. I've got a couple questions for Mr. Dunn, and then I might turn it over to my colleague, Mr. Genereux, depending on the time here. So, Mr. Dunn, you've previously been quoted stating how Canada is pulling above our weight when it comes to research and development on lithium-ion batteries, and we can all agree that this is a good thing, but it's also important to protect our intellectual property. So, based on your experience in this field, where do improvements need to be made to ensure Canadian IP in critical minerals is protected and expanded?
Well, I'm not an expert on IP and critical minerals. You know, in terms of critical materials that are derived from the minerals, that's more up my alley.
Okay, fair enough. Maybe I'll just ask then, do you have any thoughts on creating a patent box, such as they have in Quebec, which reduces corporate tax rates on patent royalties? Do you have any thoughts on that?
No.
Okay, great. Well, maybe I'll ask the same questions to Dr. Lilly then. Perhaps she might be able to answer those two questions.
Thanks for the question. I am not an expert on IP beyond issues in international trade, where a number of countries are currently working on the development of the improvement of intellectual property. And we have this reflected in most of our trade agreements, in the new NAFTA as well as TPP. We have fairly advanced IP protections. But beyond that, I don't think I can answer your question.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. And I will turn it over to my colleague, Mr. Genereux then. Thank you.
Merci, Madame Gray. Merci.
Thank you, Ms. Gray, and thanks to all. Mr. Lassalle, I understand that supply and offer is an important topic, but how come lithium is up by 700%? Is that just the supply? Well, it is the supply-offer equation, really. People realized, and again, as I say, go check the benchmark site, 204 plants being produced, and they don't have the raw materials. Volkswagen announced recently that it will buy 100% of the graphite produced outside of China by 2025 for its own battery plants. That's what it intends to do. Lithium, okay, it costs less, COVID, slowdown, and then suddenly people started saying, whoa, hang on, it isn't going to be available in the future. Tesla, Volkswagen have been very clear. For various categories of batteries, depending on the type of vehicle they're producing, they'd use different types of batteries, as Professor Na has been explaining, less or more nickel, lithium, and so on. And at that point, demand skyrocketed. We also started realizing that in Latin America, they're producing from brines. It's complicated. It takes a long time. It pollutes a lot. So suddenly, people were turning to other sources. And you can see that around the world. Thank you, Ms. Hood. In this regard, we've seen that in Canada, and I'm remembering a committee from last year, Mr. Lemire could confirm whether this is the case, but I believe we were told, I think Mr. Lassalle said this, you needed 21 permits before you could open a mine in Quebec. So given all the construction permits, the regulatory approvals, the various levels of government, the environmental requirements, is this going to slow us down in Canada and in Quebec more particularly in this regard? I don't think so. This isn't going to slow us down. I would say that our mining standards in Canada are actually beneficial because this will ensure that our batteries look different to others on the world market. Our batteries will be green, eco-responsible, better than China's in that regard. Canada has among the highest levels of environmental regulations applied in the mining sector, and it's well respected. I don't think this is going to be a problem. It's not going to drag us down. It's actually going to help us in the race. Do I still have any time? 18 seconds. All right. I'll hands up. I'm not going to encourage you to cut anyone off. Thanks you very much, witnesses. It's been terribly interesting. We should really try for another round of questions. No, with these witnesses? Yes. Very interesting. We do have one round left, and I recognize Mr. Gaillir for 5 minutes.
Chair, and thank you to the panelists for making time. So the panelists have really drilled this point that Canada can be that international supply of ethical minerals. And my first question, at least, is in that vein. It's for Mr. Walker. So Mr. Walker, this question was asked earlier as well, but I'll give you more time to expand on it. So what engagements and partnerships with Indigenous communities have you taken in Northern Ontario? Now you mentioned exploration agreements. What did these look like? How do they ensure that the rights of Indigenous peoples are protected?
Yeah, no, thanks very much for the question. You know, the first part with regards to exploration agreements, you know, they're very encompassing. Everything from respect for existing treaty rights that occur for various communities to assisting in building capacity, you know, with the communities as the progression of exploration towards development takes place. As well as the creation of business opportunities and collaboration with regards to any matters surrounding investments and working together with really working with governments with regards to infrastructure pieces that are so desperately required around critical mineral assets in the north. So, you know, it's a process. Through that process, it's about really building meaningful partnership, trusting, and really understanding the constraints that may exist for particular communities, so that as you go through that process, you're in a situation to really understand potential impacts if a mine can take place. So that's the really the what takes place on building. It's about people and relationships, and that's at the heart of all business, and building opportunities for the Indigenous communities.
Great, thank you. So you mentioned long permitting processes as well, that it takes a very long time to get a permit. Do you think that permit times could be reduced, and if so, where? And could they be reduced without lowering our standards for mining ethical minerals?
Very loaded question. I'll do my best. You know, as we've seen around the world, especially here in Canada, a huge turnover with regards to labor and capacity. We're seeing the boomers retire. We're losing a lot of experience. You know, one of our observations is in order to move quickly, perhaps start looking at collaboration with the provinces, in our case here with Ontario, to put together SWAT teams, or those few experts that truly understand the window of opportunity, and in particular, you know, new commodities such as lithium. in order to focus on assets that can be really meaningful towards building out the value chain. Through that process, really what's important, tying back into the Indigenous question, is again building out the understanding, especially in the North, on what the exploration through to mine development means, and building the capacity for optimize or maximizing Indigenous participation. So that's really is the place where we see government at various levels paying huge roles on really helping to facilitate. One last point, what we would really like to see is the possibility for resource revenue sharing for Indigenous communities in their respective traditional areas to really create alignment with the players, from communities to government to proponents such as ourselves. Align the players accordingly, and moving forward swiftly as a requirement of what we're all discussing here today is going to be so much easier. So that's a great way to maximize participation. One last thing with regards to the Indigenous communities, from a income tax perspective, just a thought that I had while someone else was talking here. When community members work on reserves, for example, here in Ontario, there's really no income tax. Once they step outside of the reserve, and let's face it, the assets don't sit within reservations in their respective treaty areas. They're outside of that. In order to encourage, perhaps government could look at a reduction in income tax for those Indigenous members to work in their traditional lands and incentivize further participation in order to really build out a strong ESG and a great brand for Canada in participation in building the supply chain. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Mr. Chair. How much time do I have?
You're over by 30 seconds.
Okay, no, we always need more time. Thank you.
I know. So this concludes our last round of questioning. I want to really, on behalf of the committee, thank all of our witnesses today. This has been, I think, a really productive meeting that will help us as we continue forward with this study. And so thank you for your time. Much appreciated. Stay safe, everyone. And this meeting is adjourned.
Merci beaucoup.